Yes, Salam people. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're well and in good health. Okay, let's dive straight in. So we've got the UK Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who's considering actually quite a big thing here, replacing stamp duty with some new property taxes. So let's take a look at what's going on. So it says here, the UK Treasury is considering a new tax on the sale of homes worth more than £500,000, so £500,000, as a step towards a radical overhaul of stamp duty and council tax, The Guardian has been told. So the Chancellor prepares the ground for tax rises later this year in autumn. Senior ministers have tasked officials to study how a new proportional property tax could be implemented and model its impact around then reporting back to the ministers once they have the information, and then see basically the various proposals that have been delivered. Now, officials are basically starting to examine this potential national property tax, which can, potentially replace stamp duty on owner-occupied homes. Now, this is what sources have been saying. They are also looking at whether, after the national tax, a local property tax could then replace council tax in the medium term in an effort to repair the battered local authority finances. Obviously, we have a lot of local authorities in the UK, some of them who have gone bankrupt and are suffering right now with budget deficits. So, no financial decisions have been made. A national tax could be implemented during this parliament, whilst it's understood an overhaul of council tax would probably take two parliaments, so the Labour would have to win another term in office. The policy option are being considered, and quite a lot of work's being done within the Treasury, looking at tapping into the vast cumulative rise in house prices and recent years at risk entrenching inequalities, making council tax, which is based around 1990s property values, more unfair. So if the plans, came to fruition, that could then provide valuable political cover for the Labour Party, both in terms of raising extra revenue without breaking Labour's pledge not to raise levies on working people, and as policies that would be likely to appeal to a lot of the party itself, the members and MPs as well. So there has been increasing pressure on the Chancellor to consider more wealth-based taxes, notably from the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. Another additional tax on more expensive homes might be presented in this light. So the national tax would be paid by owner occupiers on homes which are more than £500,000 at the time of sale. Now, the amount would be determined by the value of the property, with a rate set by central government, which would directly collect the proceeds via HM Revenue and Customs. It will not replace stamp duty on second homes. Current rates of stamp duty vary depending on whether someone is a first time buyer, so the first time they're looking at purchasing a property, or maybe banded in steps upward, depending on the value of the property being bought and sold. It would basically take time to phase in a replacement stamp duty, and a range of options are being considered for phasing in these potential changes. Revenue raised by stamp duty on primary residences varies considerably year on year, and it depends on the housing market, the conditions, financial situation, the local economy, UK economy, and so on. So, in the last financial year, it raised £11.6 billion according to the UK government figures. Over time, it is believed the new national property tax would be more reliable, consistent source of revenue, and ultimately raise the amount of stamp duty. Raise the same amount as stamp duty. The levy would only affect about a fifth of property sales, compared with about 60% with current levels of stamp duty, which is paid by the buyer of a home. The average price of a home in the UK was around £272,000, 664 in July, according to the Bank Nationwide. Sources said Treasury officials, in part drawing on the findings of a 48-page report from the centre-right think tank Onward, which was published in August last year. Onward's report proposes a dual approach of a national and local proportional property tax on property based on its value. It's written by Dr. Tim Leunig, who worked as a government advisor for over 10 years and was closely involved with devising the furlough scheme over the last few years. Now, Leunig wrote that these proposals would make it easier and cheaper to move house for a better job or to be near family, as well as being fairer. It should not be the case that the terrace house in Burnley pays more than a mansion in Kensington or Chelsea, and it wouldn't be under these proposals. The UK government has already showed signals of adopting some of these steps towards council tax. Leunig laid out in his report. The first step would be to end the overfunding of various councils in affluent areas of inner London, mainly Westminster, Wandsworth, Kensington, and Chelsea councils. This is similar to the approach laid out this summer in a consultation on how to redistribute from richer to poorer councils. Idea of new local annual property levy to replace council tax was also proposed by Onward. Now, that would essentially result in owners, rather than residents of a property worth up to 500k, paying varying rates of tax depending on the value of their home. They would pay a minimum of £800 a year, and funds this generate would go directly to local councils whose finances have been stretched a lot over the last few years. Rayner has already raised the prospect of ramping up redistributions of funds to address regional inequalities, which she has argued are exacerbated by the existing council tax system, which replaced the poll tax in 1993. So, a Treasury spokesperson has said that they set out a plan for change. Best way to strengthen public finances is by growing the economy, which is our focus. Changes to tax and spend policy are not the only ways of doing this, as seen with our planning reforms, which are expected to grow the economy by £6.8 billion and cut borrowing by £3.4 billion. We are committed to keeping taxes for working people as low as possible. So basically, our last autumn budget, they protected working people's pay slips and kept the promise not to raise basic or higher additional rates of income tax, employee national insurance, or VAT. Economists from the right and left of the political spectrum have heavily criticised stamp duty and council tax. Stamp duty applies in England and Northern Ireland. There are different approaches to some land taxes in Wales and Scotland. Council tax banding based on older property values is considered flawed and out of date by economists in all parts of UK and is believed to be ripe for reform. In June, the government launched a consultation on how to reform the allocation of funds raised by council tax. Labour said that the Fair Funding Review aims to fix the broken funding system we inherited, which was left local authorities across the country in deep crisis. The strategy has already met a backlash after it emerged deprived inner city London councils stand to lose millions of pounds. Now, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, an economic think tank, has said that while reform was very much needed, the proposed changes in the government's funding review appear to run counter to an expectation that deprived and urban areas and would win at the expense of more affluent and rural areas. The government baseline funding reform proposals are not particularly redistributive to poor urban areas of England. While any wealth-related tax could provoke strong criticism from right-wing opponents, ministers have shown willingness to ignore such criticism from policies that generally affect wealthier people, such as adding VAT on private school fees and changes to inheritance tax for some farms. Now, if billed as part of a longer-term replacement of stamp duty, it might also be helpful given the existing levy is unpopular and widely seen as a blunt tool and a block on the property real estate market here in the UK. Using property taxes as a replacement for council tax would be complex and implement and almost inevitably require a second term in office, which means Labour would have to win the next general election, which is due in 2029. But there is an increasing acceptance among all the main parties that the current system for local government funding is obsolete and unviable. So, Labour has already committed to the biggest shake-up of council structures in England for decades, but does not want to oversee the predicted series of local authorities declaring effective bankruptcy, especially as many will be run by the party. Last week, The Guardian revealed the Treasury was also looking at ways to raise money from inheritance tax in an attempt to ease pressure on the country's finances in the run-up to the Chancellor's autumn budget. We did actually cover that in a previous video, which you can check out on the channel. Okay, people, please do let us know what you think about this new property tax potentially replacing stamp duty and also council tax being replaced. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Okay, people, catch you in the next one.